Hello and welcome, and we're here at Holistic Investments, and I'm your host, Konstantin Kogun, and I'm delighted to have today my very professional and I would say one of the most crypto-savvy friends, Peng Zhong. Hi, Peng.
Hey, Konstantin. It's great to be on here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And Peng is the CEO of Tendermint, and that's, as I'm sure a lot of you know, that's the main core development force and behind Cosmos, and they're one of the biggest protocols in the industry, and they do a lot of great developments recently. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to cover a lot about how did Cosmos even become the largest proof of stake protocol, the interoperability, a lot of the new development in the space and the Stargate. And before that, obviously, we have to throw a legal disclaimer just in case if somebody would ask questions about the ATOM token. So this content is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or any other advice. So let's start from the beginning, right? So tell us a little bit about your deep dive into crypto rabbit hole. How did you start? I know you started. We started roughly in the same year, 2012, and but you've definitely created a lot of code, a lot of great products. And what is the difference between Tendermint and Cosmos?
Yeah, so I'm happy to dive into that. Like you said, I got, my first eyes on crypto in 2012. I saw, that Bitcoin reached $1 on Hacker News. I spent a lot of time at Hacker News back then. And I was like, what is this thing? Should I be paying attention to it? And, I ignored it until it got to $100, I think, was that 2013, 2014, around then. That's when a lot of eyes started looking at it. And I was like, I should put, a little bit of money in there. Unfortunately, I didn't hold it. So I don't really have much in the way of Bitcoin these days, but my belief in the power of crypto, to change the world has strengthened every single year since then. So I'm really happy to be working in this space. So what does Tendermint do? So Tendermint was first launched in 2014 with just 2 or 3 people. I was not actually included. I'm not a co-founder of Tendermint. I was the first employee brought in around the end of 2015. So this was a company built by Ethan Buckman and Jae Kwon. Jae Kwon was the founder, and the two of them had focused developing a new protocol called Tendermint BFT Consensus. Right? They architected the idea, but they didn't build it. They were working on building it and providing it. But as always, this is only the first step to an actual blockchain. This is only the consensus engine. It's a way for trustless entities around the world to come to consensus about, let's say, what the next block is in a blockchain. And the basics of it is that you need at least 2/3 of the tokens involved to vote that a particular block is accurate before it's finalized.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's maybe a little bit elaborate on this, because I think that is important to make sure, people who don't have a clear understanding of how the governance works and how the interoperability between the other protocols works. What's the core problem you were solving back then?
Yeah, so the core problem back then, as envisioned by Jae Kwon, the founder of the company, was that he's noticing the exponentially climbing power costs of Bitcoin, right? And even today, the cost of mining Bitcoin is growing on a yearly basis, on a daily basis right now with the upsurge in prices. I just checked today, and the carbon footprint of Bitcoin is currently equal to that of New Zealand, right? So it's eating a lot of power. I recall reading somewhere that you can power a house for 4 months with 1 Bitcoin transaction these days. So that's a very high cost. And of course, I think that cost makes sense if you're sending lots of money, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. That makes total sense. But if you're trying to send smaller transactions, there's probably much more efficient ways of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So, we believe in a world where Bitcoin needs to exist, right? Clearly, it's one of the most secure ways to put in some of your capital. But we think that for the vast majority of transactions, Bitcoin is probably the wrong answer for sustainability and environmental concerns. So that
the reason why you say it, sorry, just to because of the proof of work as a consensus mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the difference between a consensus protocol that's being used in a project like Ethereum or Bitcoin today, those of which are proof of work, is that in Cosmos, we're using a proof of stake algorithm. And in fact, Tendermint Core was one of the very first proof of stake algorithms for a blockchain. And it's one that has the widest use today in all of crypto. The technology that we built on top of Tendermint, it's called the Cosmos SDK, has millions of dollars worth of R&D put into it from the Interchain Foundation. And this software platform has been used widely around the world. There's over 200 mainnet projects. So mainnet are live blockchains that use the Cosmos SDK. Mm-hmm. And the total value that's being secured by the SDK is over 16 billion USD today. Of course, a large chunk of that is Binance. So Binance Chain is actually built on top of the Cosmos SDK. Mm-hmm. So going back a bit, right? I mentioned the Interchain Foundation. Where does this come in? So we were, 3 people in the Tendermint team in 2015, and we wanted to, actually start with enterprise blockchain. We thought, enterprise was an area to get into. Private blockchains, has a lot of merit. We had a very difficult time finding funding for enterprise blockchain, and so we pivoted to a public blockchain idea, and we wanted to call it Cosmos. So in 2016, the Cosmos white paper was released, and in early 2017, we hosted our fundraiser where we accepted Bitcoin and Ethereum in return for actually nothing. You were promised nothing, but it was a fundraiser to allow us to start building this software we call Cosmos. And all of this funding, the 17 million USD in BTC and ETH, went to this foundation in Switzerland called the Interchain Foundation, which has a mission to fund the development of Cosmos. So the Cosmos SDK is now, not a mature product, right? We're still actively iterating on it, but it has been in use, even though it's not, a final product. And I think the coolest thing coming into this year is the completion of the white paper. So the white paper we set out to accomplish in 2016 is about to complete. And in fact, it's going to complete in 2 weeks from now, on February 18th. We have a massive upgrade coming for the Cosmos Hub, the Atom blockchain. And it'll finish the entire feature set we outlined in the original white paper.
Yeah, that's exciting. I think that this is great news, and we definitely want to understand better, how did you reach this? So a few words about the IBC protocol, and that's what you were mentioning, so the launch is expected in 2 weeks, so we are now, just to clarify, we're recording as of February 3rd, so so basically the 3rd week of February, there'll be a big launch, a lot of expectations, and I think your community is very excited. I've read a lot of, very favorable comments. Now, maybe to complete, before we go to the latest updates, maybe just to complete the conversation between right now, so you've launched the public version of blockchain, and you've tried to raise enterprise, and I understand back in the days it was still very early. Now, the public chain is widely adopted, and if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the largest proof of stake protocol in the world right now, with, as you mentioned, all 200 projects in mainnet, and the total value.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if we're the largest proof of stake protocol. I think there are probably larger ones. I would say Polkadot is probably larger. They're also a proof of stake protocol, but we do claim as being the most popular protocol, right? We have, like I mentioned before, there's over 200 projects that do use the Cosmos SDK, and the popularity of the usage of this chain, of the stack of tools to build this chain is definitely more than any other chain out there.
Yeah. So that was the question. So it depends what metric are we talking about, right? If we're talking about the market cap or the volume, the daily volume, that's one conversation, purely financial. We're talking about people who are buying large numbers are actually using the platforms that are built on Cosmos. So you are bigger, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say outside of Ethereum, we have one of the very largest developer ecosystems in crypto today. If you search over LinkedIn, we have over, I think, 2,500 people who list the Cosmos SDK on their resumes. So there's clearly a lot of mainstream adoption of the SDK. It's clearly very small yet, but we have a bunch of tools coming up that are hoping to make it even more easy to use for mainstream devs, so non-blockchain devs.
Got it. Well, recently you were competing, I think you, Polkadot and Cardano, you were competing for the massive dev adoption, all three of you, and there was 1 week, there's number one or number two, so you're always blockchain, which is great. I think I wish that all three of the protocols win because, they have different, I would say, purposes and in some ways and different use cases. So, and we're going to talk about the differences. But before, I would say let's jump in then to IBC Protocol launch, as you mentioned. So you were deemed many times by publications that you're Ethereum killer, right? I know your stance, Peng, that you're not considering that you want to kill Ethereum, so you want to just improve certain aspects, right? So can you elaborate on this? What is unique about IBC Protocol?
Yeah, so IBC was a huge part of the Cosmos vision, and it is nearing completion. It will launch in one form by mid this month. But I think I didn't manage to explain, why Cosmos was created in the first place. And so, we have Tendermint Core, right? This very environmentally friendly, sustainable consensus protocol for blockchains. So, what's the deal with Cosmos? Well, the reason why we wanted to create Cosmos is that another problem has been identified back in 2016, which is that blockchains cannot exchange tokens with each other, right? I think even to this day, it's not a very common feature. So where do you go to exchange tokens today? Well, right now you go to a centralized exchange like Binance, like Coinbase, etc. And that's the only way you're able to do an exchange of, let's say, Ethereum for Bitcoin, or Cardano for Ethereum, or any number of combinations which currently are not possible, aside from putting your coins into a centralized ledger controlled by a company and having them actually manipulate the numbers for you and get the tokens back. So we think this is a big problem with crypto today, right? There's definitely a lot of activity happening on Ethereum, right? There's these fantastic wrapping systems where you're able to wrap Bitcoin and put it onto Ethereum and put it to use in one or more of these DeFi protocols. But this is a very limited feature. And while there are Bitcoin pegs, what other pegs really exist, right? Can you bring Polkadot tokens onto Ethereum? Right? Can you bring Cosmos tokens onto Ethereum? There's not really great ways of doing that.
Yeah,
I'm sure actually ways probably exist, but there's no standard around that. So this is what IBC is. So IBC is a standard. It's the inter-blockchain communication protocol between any blockchain that implements it, that allows for the sending and receiving of tokens across different blockchains. So with this launch in the middle of February, we're adding this functionality to the Atom blockchain, right? So that will be the first step towards this vision of Cosmos, the Internet of Blockchains. It's a protocol that has been widely supported by the Cosmos SDK. So let's say you want to build a chain today, and you might gravitate towards the SDK because it is the world's most popular. So that would already give you instant access to IBC and allow you to, let's say, create a token like Constantine Coin and send it from your chain to the Cosmos Hub, and for the Cosmos Hub to send you atoms. And we think it's an amazing breakthrough that will hopefully reduce our reliance on centralized exchanges.
So what you're also explaining, it's quite fascinating because that will empower DEXs, which exist right now, and there's a lot of them. That will empower them to specifically do the swap, of any type of any pairs to each other. First of all, instantly, so it's going to be fast. It's going to be reliable. They rely on your protocol, which is backed by a team that proven itself to be be professional and secure, like especially if we're talking about like the fear of having like any cyber crime, like real problems. And then the third aspect, it's also cheaper, right? So I want to also specify, like right now there, one of the biggest criticisms, like Ethereum is growing, we're on all-time high, everyone is excited about the price, but people who are actually investing like in yield farming, or they're actually participating in any networks, they're also a bit concerned about the gas fees. I know it's everybody's talking about it, but can you maybe just say a few words? How will that solve this gas fee problem in terms of just like purely transaction fees?
Yeah, so that's a great point. So I think that the DeFi activity happening on Ethereum is incredible, and it really ushers in the next set of people to get into crypto. But like you said, the fees are very prohibitive. Let's say you have anywhere under 10,000 USD to start trading. I don't think you'd start with DeFi on Ethereum, right? The fees are in the hundreds of dollars right now, at least last I checked. And with every transaction, with every loan that you're making, with every token that you're staking, you're losing like 5% of it every time. It's clearly not something that is friendly to newcomers. So like you mentioned earlier, we're not an Ethereum killer, but what we do at Cosmos is we are the bridger of chains, right? So if there's any sort of functionality DeFi-wise that can be moved onto a chain with much lower gas costs, then we see that as a way for people to start migrating some of their activity over. The current costs of transactions in Cosmos right now is I think under a penny still. So it's several orders of magnitude cheaper than on Ethereum. And that is just on the Cosmos Hub blockchain, right? So one very big differentiating factor between us and other projects in the ecosystem is that we are a multi-blockchain organization. So that means that, let's say, for the sake of argument, that we have as much activity as Ethereum under the Cosmos Hub, and the transaction cost may increase, right? Instead of less than a penny, it might be let's say a few dollars or tens of dollars even, and it does reduce our argument that we are quite a bit cheaper. But what Cosmos offers, right, and with IBC, is the idea of multiple independent chains that can perform similar functions, perhaps even the same function, right, as Ethereum 1.0. And through the power of IBC, you're able to still conduct your activities, your own DeFi activities, and the end goal, right, is to actually abstract blockchains away altogether and give you an interface where it's just you and your tokens. So while you get the benefit of a multi-chain paradigm, you don't really even need to know which chain your tokens are on, just that they're generating value for you.
Yeah. So to clarify on that, I think that's the composability characteristic that you mentioned before. And I think so what's unique here, so you're making compatible all the different chains, and you're making more accessible so that the average user will not even care, are you in Polkadot, are you in Cosmos, are you in other chains? So, but the question is how fast this adoption will happen. What do you think will happen? So you launch this IBC protocol. I think everyone is excited, and people will then we have other solutions. Again, it's Cardano and Polkadot, and then you might have 5 different solutions, right? So how do you think this transition, of the people who are already using your chain and people who are not using your chain and would love to try that, how it will happen?
Yeah, so this happens through funding. It's the simplest answer, right? The Interchain Foundation got 17 million in USD in tokens back then. The treasury is over 200 million now due to the appreciation of the tokens. And while the Cosmos SDK is the first framework that has adopted IBC, we've put efforts towards actually getting IBC supported in Polkadot, which is funded through the ICF. There are potential ways to get actually IBC working through Solidity smart contracts on Ethereum 1.0. So as crazy it may sound, there actually might even be IBC on Ethereum. And I think the one sort of differentiating factor between us and other sort of more centralized multi-chain solutions like Polkadot or Avalanche is that we're not charging people fees to use this protocol, right? You implement it into your chain, right? We can pay for this. But if you want to start using IBC, you're free to use it. We don't ask you to buy Atom tokens. You don't have to pay taxes, for example, to share the security with our chain. Right now, it's all quite independent, and we think that this level of independence is what will convince other chains to adopt this protocol, which only has upsides for them, and without downsides.
Got it. So in other words, it's open source, and you also have foundation that is backing it up and will, if needed, allocate the dev force behind it to conduct the migration if any project will decide to do so. Okay, so just
that might raise the question as to why invest in the Atom token? Why care about the Atom token at all, right?
Yeah. That was my
if it's not needed. So first of all, I guess for the people in the ecosystem already, the Atom token is what has allowed the Interchain Foundation to actually fund all this effort, right? So the fundraisers who in 2017, over the course of just 28 minutes, gave us the ETH and BTC to fund this, are ardent supporters of the ecosystem. And without their support, we wouldn't be anywhere. We wouldn't have the Cosmos SDK. We wouldn't have, $16 billion being secured through our software. But that only matters to people who hold atoms today. What about the next, set of people who might want to be a part of this? So IBC is, and the completion of the white paper, right, in mid February, is only the beginning of the utility generation and value accrual for the Atom. A couple of the first features we're hoping to add onto the Cosmos Hub blockchain, the blockchain that has the Atom, is a DEX. And it's a DEX that will use Atom pairs to start with. So, right, if you launch your own chain with the Cosmos SDK, right, then you're able to just send tokens to the hub. And if you have some atoms, right, you're able to create a token pair and allow the process of price discovery for your new token.
Okay. So how will this DEX differentiate from the other DEXs, if I may ask?
Yeah, so the differentiation here is that this DEX on the hub is primarily built to support, chains that support IBC, right? No other DEX really can claim this right now. And out of all the Cosmos SDK built chains, there's only one chain actually with a higher market cap. That's Binance Chain. Binance Chain, right, is owned by a corporation, and it's not a decentralized chain like Cosmos is. The Cosmos Hub has over 36,000 stakeholders around the world, and I think we believe this level of decentralization makes it, a great place, and the logical place to place an IBC DEX, for example. So, yeah, I talk about right, building a chain with the Cosmos SDK and connecting it to the hub and sending tokens and creating some sort of pair. But how difficult is that really? So this is something I've been working on at our company, and we've been building a set of tools we call Starport. And the latest status is that we're able to allow anyone to build a new blockchain and actually launch and deploy it within 5 minutes.
Wow. Is this Starport or Stargate?
Starport.
Starport, okay. So that there's also you have so many different interesting cosmic names. But there's also a Stargate that is a separate initiative of Cosmos Hub, right? Right.
So everything I've talked about to this point is actually Stargate. So Stargate is the completion of the original white paper in 2016 and the upgrade that's happening on the 18th. So that's Stargate.
Got it. So Starport, we're enabled. So let's maybe create a few minutes guideline, for anyone who's watching and who wants to basically launch something on Cosmos. So what are the first steps? What they have to do?
Yeah. So right now it's command line based, but there's a very short video actually on the Cosmos channel that shows you the process of writing, I think just the 2 commands that you need to actually create and launch a new chain. we're going to create a UI for this soon, but essentially you can compare this to the ease of creating a new ERC20 token on Ethereum, right? So if you want to create a new token with your name on it, it's pretty easy to do on Ethereum. And I think that the amazing thing about what we've done is that we've made the process of creating a brand new blockchain just as easy as the creation of new tokens on Ethereum.
So all you need is basically developers who are like knowledgeable, like in writing 2 lines of commands, right? And using and integrating to your SDK, and that's all.
Yeah, I would argue that you don't even have to be a developer to get this going. But of course, if you want to have some custom functionality on your new blockchain, then of course you need to know Golang, which is the language of the Cosmos SDK.
Now, the question is more from the common sense. Why do you need to create the new chain? So what do you consider will be the most popular use cases?
Yeah, so we believe that the most popular use cases will be in DeFi, right? So it'll be the process of us slowly moving away from traditional finance services into decentralized finance services that are really, more open to the entire world to participate in, instead of, let's say, being locked to a specific segment of people in one particular country. This permissionless way to access these financial services, I think, will be the primary use case of these new chains.
Got it. So go ahead.
Yeah, let's say you're not ambitious enough to create a new DeFi service. What could you actually use this for as well? I think there's a bunch of toy ways you can use this. So let's say you're playing a game with some friends and you want some way of keeping score, right? You're actually able to create a new chain just with a new, let's say, game token that you're able to send and receive to your friends. And if for some reason your game becomes incredibly successful, somehow you're getting millions of views on it on YouTube, you might want to be able to issue these tokens to the people watching your channel. And potentially those tokens will gain value. You could send them to the DEX on the Cosmos Hub and actually have people buy and sell these game tokens, right? That's one example. Another example might be for cross-team collaboration. Let's say you have some sort of kudos system in your company's Slack, and you give people points, right? So why not give those points real value by putting a blockchain behind it? With the designer background that I come from, I think that bringing blockchain to everyone and allowing people to use this sort of very cool tool that's able to securely and in a decentralized way manage assets, and beyond that, right, use those assets to vote based on how you feel. I think there's a lot of potential there to replace a lot of other more off-chain mechanisms and centralized mechanisms for getting consensus. Even like polls, right? Even things like polls could be replaced with blockchain. Clearly we're at a very early stage in the technology's history right now, future history. But I think that in the long run, right, the ease of use of building a new blockchain will give it a lot more uses than we can even imagine right now.
Yeah. So another fun use case, can you create an NFT of any person or any fictional character, right?
Yeah. So there are actually multiple teams using the Cosmos SDK to build NFTs and NFT style projects and NFT style marketplaces. What we're working on for this year actually is to establish an IBC NFT standard. Mm-hmm. So while right now NFTs exist on their own chain, we're creating a standard where you can transfer these NFTs across different blockchains. So one model internally we're thinking about is when it comes to something that's needed in an interchain environment, which is chain names, right? So in a similar way that we use domain names today to visit various websites, chains also need their own names. Of course, the domain name system is centralized, and we think that chain names can be decentralized and run with a group of people instead of something that's able to be entirely controlled by ICANN, for example, as an organization. But chain names are actually NFTs, or they could be NFTs, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm imagining a future where you can buy these chain names wrap them as NFTs, and actually buy and sell them to other people.
Wow, that's impressive. So you would need to create a separate marketplace for that. Interesting. Now, let me ask you some other practical questions which I received. Like, so there, this tendency of creating multiple versions, like of course of Uniswap or like or Sushi Swap or other, like, I don't know. There's a bunch of food names there, like and animal names. That's a popular thing right now. So my question to you, how would anyone who's now, like, let's say watching and wants to create their own DEX, with a, maybe some unique value proposition, like how would they be able to do it practically using the IBC protocol?
All right, that's a great question. So Tendermint, we're actually funding a team right now to build a DEX module. So this is similar to Uniswap 1.0. It allows for just the creation of liquidity through token pairs, and it's near completion. In fact, we have a demo out there. But this module is also entirely open source alongside the rest of the Cosmos SDK. The SDK is modular. You're able to piece together which modules you need for your chain and launch a chain, right? So let's say you're a developer, you want to build a DEX. You're in fact able to take the liquidity module today, put it into your version of the Cosmos SDK and launch it if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. Of course, that glosses over quite a lot of points, right? In comparison, let's say to Ethereum or BTC, where you start launching the chain through mining, right? So you can invite a few people to start, let's say, running the mining software for your chain, off the graphics card from your desktop or something. It's very different in the proof of stake world. In the proof of stake world, one difference is that you need to allocate the token cap table from the beginning. So how we did it, in the Cosmos world was that, we looked at how much people donated in terms of ETH and BTC, and then we converted that to a price. And we thought, we can potentially give, some of these fundraisers some tokens based on their contributions. So this sort of effort takes quite a lot of work, right? And we're also working on solving this issue for new chains. Let me explain. So on the Cosmos Hub, right, there's 125 125 teams that do the mining or the validation for the Cosmos Hub. Mm-hmm. So let's say you want to create a new chain. And I mentioned to you, it's only a few minutes to launch a new chain. How does that work? How do you get 125 people to, let's say, start validating your chain? Well, that's not an easy thing to do, right? Decentralized collaboration and getting a bunch of people to join, a bunch of technical people, right? Because this includes, you needing to run a server that's always on and always secure. So as part of Starport, right, we have this tool. It's a two-sided marketplace. We're considering this the Uber for blockchain validation. Mm-hmm. So how it works is that as a chain developer or a coordinator, let's say you with Constantine Coin, you want to build a new chain. And of course, if you launch it yourself, it's not really a chain. It's just like a web app, essentially, with your coin on it. But if you want to get other people interested, so you would use this app, this Uber for validation and say, hey, I'm launching a new chain. Who wants to participate, right? And then the validators who are paying attention at that time, or, let's say you set a 7-day, notice that you're launching a chain, they can provide their validator hardware for you. You can approve them, check them off, add them to your chain, and then at a specified date and time, you guys all start your machines and launch the chain together.
So now, I think there's a very important question here. What is their incentive here? Because, like right now, the time is precious. All the developers, they're trying to be also focused on something that they're like the core products that they're working on. Mm-hmm. So what, besides the speculative opportunity to have like early token and to do like 10x multiples, what other incentives do they have?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head. The biggest incentive is that, your token, Constantine Coin, is going to do very well, right? And to be able to launch a chain, you need to allocate essentially all of the tokens you want to give out, right? So let's say you get 10 validators, maybe an equal distribution is to give yourself 20% and every one of them like 8% or something, right? So the numbers add up to 100% at the end of the day. And yeah, that takes time. It takes time for you to negotiate with each validator to decide how much tokens they want. If they're a very well-known validator, you might want to give them a bit more. Otherwise, they're not going to bother. But beyond that, by making this into a more streamlined system, there's a lot of potential here for validator companies, right? These companies who validate for 15, 20x chains, et cetera, to automate this entirely on their end, right? So instead of using a UI to talk to you and be like, hey, we want to validate for 8% of the tokens and wait for you to reply and then wait for them to be accepted, et cetera, they're able to just consume the API itself. And they can say, hey, out of the 100 chains that launch on a daily basis off of this platform, I want to validate for the top 10% of them. And turning this into an entirely automated tool so that in some ways, launching a chain becomes as easy as using Google Cloud or AWS. There's actually no human involvement at all other than you just selecting the services you want and paying them.
Yeah. So, but you need to run certain libraries. You need to have servers, nodes, so there are certain infrastructure costs that are connected to this. And at the same time, when we're talking about validators, maybe it's worthwhile to even explain a little bit, what is the role of a validator? And is there like a concept, as a, so to speak, like a prime validator? Because, you mentioned there can be 120, 130 of them, right? So you don't want to speak like individually to each one of them. So is there in brokerage, there's a prime broker world where they aggregate access to all the exchanges and they can allow you to have a better rate, better service, they can execute something for you. Is there something like in your ecosystem where it's like a prime validator, they can talk to one person who will actually make a decision to help you launch your project or not?
No, there's not. So right, a prime validator would be incredibly helpful, but that would also, I think, go against what blockchain is about. Mm-hmm. If you had one entity who's capable of launching and running your chain, that means they also have the capability to adjust everyone's balances and even block transactions from happening. And at that point, the value of that chain would be based on the value of that company. So you may as well not even use a blockchain at that point, mm-hmm. right? So there's definitely a lot of use cases which don't benefit from a chain at all. But we're targeting the use cases which benefit from a number of different validators participating together to ensure that every other one is doing the right thing, not making a double spend, not adjusting someone's balance in the background. Right. So let's talk about being a validator, right? What does this involve? So there's two ways to look at it. One of which is to look at the Atom blockchain and the validators on that. So on the Atom blockchain, sort of the longest running blockchain that's built on the Cosmos SDK, to become a validator, you essentially need to stake more tokens than the 125th validator, right? So it's a very simple linear chart of whoever has staked the most can become a validator, and the cutoff is at the 125 mark. So as of today, you need to stake 18,000 Atom to actually get onto that list, and that's how much is that right now? Is that about $160,000, $170,000 USD right now? Mm-hmm. It's a pretty big chunk of change. But in addition to that, you also really need at least one full-time site reliability engineer to run the service for you, right? It requires you to have a secure setup, whether if you want to go entirely cloud-based or co-locate your server in a data center, you need someone really to pay attention to it full-time. So both the upfront cost and the cost for such an engineer is very high, right? And the cost of doing so is sort of exactly the point of proof of stake based security, right? Because it costs a lot of money, and because you're putting all this money up at stake, this is why we're able to guarantee this level of security on the Cosmos Hub. But this amount, which is what, 180,000, and let's say salary 10,000 per month, is not the only way you can be a validator, right? I mentioned before there's over 200 projects that use the SDK, every one of them could probably use validation, and it might be much cheaper to get involved. Maybe you don't need to hire a full-time person. Maybe it could be your part-time hobby, and some of them might only require, even like $100 or $150 to become a validator. So I would really recommend, if you want to be a validator, try validating for one of these smaller chains. And then beyond that, right, there's the idea of chains launched by one person, like Constantine chain we talked about earlier, right? How much does it cost to validate for that? Well, in fact, you can validate for that very, very cheaply. You can pay for like a cloud VPS, right, for like $5 a month. And that's probably enough to validate for your chain, depending on, I'm not trying to insult how much your token will be worth, but what I'm saying is,
I understand. If it's
like a very new chain,
it's new.
You can scale up your work over time.
Yeah. You can buy buckets and AWS and then it will be like 500, whatever, 5,000 if it's larger adoption. But let's talk about a little bit of the upside, because I know it's also for people who are not that technical, who are still interested in exploring how to be a validator, just purely for the financial interest, right?
Yeah.
So what are the upsides of becoming a validator?
Right. So before I go into the upsides, I need to explain there's probably two potential ways to be a validator, right? One way, like I mentioned before, is to put up the upfront capital and then pay for engineering resources, whether it's yourself or someone else to maintain this for you. We're realizing that this is also a barrier to entry, right? If we want to have a future with thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of chains, where are we going to find all these SRE engineers?
And where are you, by the way, when you're saying pay this money, like you're going to say that's $180,000, like maybe it's worthwhile also explaining how do you even allocate money to become a validator?
Right. So this money, like I mentioned before, is the USD equivalent of the atoms that are required to validate for the hub. If you don't want to validate for the hub and validate for like let's say a cheaper chain, then clearly the amount of capital required is much less. So yeah, that's a very technical way of becoming a validator. What we're also doing at Tendermint is we're creating a much easier way to validate. So if you use apps like Robinhood or Wealthsimple or any other sort of mobile stock trading app, you notice it's pretty easy to actually buy one share of any particular company. So we think there's a way to actually make validation as easy as buying a share of a company. And that is through some infrastructure work we're building in-house to actually, in the background, do all of this work for you. So essentially all you need to do is find a chain you want to participate in, and sort of drag a slider as to how much hardware you want to pay for. And we would run the entire validator for you. So those are the two ways, right? That's still a work in progress, but something I'm really excited about because I want everyone to validate. I don't think it should be, only something that SRE engineers or DevOps people, can participate in. I want everyone to be able to validate. And so what's the upside, right? The upside is that you're going to earn tokens. On the Cosmos Hub anyway, you'll earn tokens every 7 seconds. And if you validate for other chains in the ecosystem, you'll earn a similar amount. The current amount of interest you earn right now floats between anywhere from 7 to 20% per year, depending on how many tokens, how many validators have staked. So like a very simple example might be that there's actually a great calculator for this. It's called staking-rewards.com. You can enter in a number of atoms that you've purchased that you want to stake, and then it'll give you, sort of your return. And your return also depends on how often you compound it, right? How often you withdraw the rewards and stake the rewards. But generally, it's going to be decently high. And so that's why it's worth becoming a validator.
And then when we're talking about like potentially staking the atom, right? So like atom is not mined, right? So that's it is earned like in the like hybrid, special hybrid like POS algorithm, and then there are places where you can actually like earn rewards by staking atom, right? And that's how you partially create value, as we call it, yield farming in a way, right? And so Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on this? Like, what are you considering, like, right now, one of the best places where you can stake it, and why did you decide to do this hybrid algorithm?
Sure. All right. So let me explain. So we've talked about validators, right, for like the past 10 or 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned that on the hub anyway, there's only 125 slots, and you need to be pretty massively capitalized to even get onto the very bottom of that list. So what about everyone else? Right? I mentioned that there's like 36,000 or around 40,000 people who are actively involved and hold atoms. So what do those people do? They're not just going to twiddle their thumbs and do nothing with it. So that's where I think where you mentioned this sort of this model that you mentioned comes in, right? This two-part model. There's the validators who are actually providing the hardware to secure the network and putting upfront a lot of tokens to stake. So everyone else, the 36,000 other people, are able to choose between the 125 who they want to delegate their tokens to. So delegation means that you find a validator, you look at their website, you see how they operate. You check their mission, you check their vision. You see if they're, let's say, even politically aligned with who you are. Because when you give them tokens, when you delegate tokens to them, their rank in this ladder goes up, right, in the validator chart. So one popular validator, let's say, I'm just going to point one out, called Sika, right, used to charge a 0% commission rate. So because they charge nothing for providing validation services to these delegators, a lot of delegators delegated to them. And they became, sort of one of the top 5 validators in Cosmos. But what's in general,
model, by the way, if they're how they're surviving if they're not charging any fees.
Yeah, so that was just like a temporary model. They've actually increased their commission rate to 3%.
Okay.
Right. So there's definitely a lot of different business models you can come at this from. But essentially, the commission rate I mentioned earlier is charged on you as an atom holder. So again, with Sika and the 3% commission rate, that means that out of the 7 to 20% interest you earn every year, 3% of that goes back to Sika. By 3%, I don't mean like 3% out of 7% or 20%. I mean like 0.03 times whatever you earned over the course of the year. 3% is still generally very low. A lot of validators, I think the average commission rate right now is 10%. And this commission rate is what allows these validators to continue paying for their hardware, paying for their SRE engineers to become a validator.
So basically, if you go to Singa or somewhere like Singa or Atomic Wallet, you right now the rates I've seen, like, it's about 10%. That's annualized. So that's how much rewards you earn. So let's say you put 10,000 atoms, right, and then you earn about 273 atoms, like it's your 10% yearly ROI, and that would be about like $2,500, right? Which is still pretty amazing, and that's in case if you stake it for 3 months. By the way, if you stake it for the maximum period, if you're 10,000 atoms, like you can stake for a year, and you earn. I'm just looking at I have a calculator here, right? So that's going to be like about $9,000 worth of dollars again, as we speak right now. It's a floating rate, just because there's the fluctuation of the price of atom itself, right? So that changes. But generally, as I see, like the total market, there's about 2.5 billion right now in the market cap, and the staked volume, as I've seen, it's more than about 65% stake. So my question to you: what happens when let's say the numbers will increase to 80% or 90%, or do you have a certain limitation how you will actually try to manage your treasury and try to maintain the staking ratio?
Yeah. So I mentioned before the inflation rate or the interest rate moves between 7 to 20%, right? Mm-hmm. So the interest rate actually goes up the fewer atoms that are staked, right? Let's say for some reason a lot of people unstake their atoms. Let's say they want to send it onto exchange, they want to do something else with it. Then the interest rate would rise to 20%, which should incentivize more people to stake. And the targeted staking percentage is 70%. So we're looking for 70% of all atoms to continue to be staked. And if it doesn't hit 70%, the inflation rate will gradually rise until 70% is hit. But yeah, let's say you're new to Atom right now. This might still be boring. Like, why would you bother just buying the token to stake it and earn more atoms? Like, what's the point of atoms, right? And we have a bunch of really cool features coming to the Cosmos Hub, which is secured by the Atom. So why would you bother staking? Well, that's because, like I mentioned before, this DEX, this IBC-enabled DEX is coming this year. So by staking your Atom, you earn both the inflation rate, the 7 to 20%, but you also earn transaction fees, right? I did mention that transaction fees are really low right now, like sub 1 penny. But with DEXs comes a lot of liquidity and a lot of movement of tokens, and so the amount earned through fees should increase. But beyond that, you're able to use the Atom itself as a liquidity pair on this DEX. Like on Uniswap, you'd use it for like an ETH and an ERC20 pair, right? You can use the Atom as a pair. And potentially, you might even earn more on your Atom by putting it into the DEX compared to staking it. And I think it's going to be a very interesting problem that we'll have to resolve together with all the Atom holders to see what makes the most sense, right? Clearly, we don't want everyone to be unstaking and then yield farming with their Atom, because that would reduce the security of the chain. But beyond just the DEX, right? I mentioned before, there's a chain name system where you can use to register chains and allow for the Cosmos Hub to know, what tokens are coming through IBC. There's a plan for this idea called staking derivatives, right? Which might solve the incentive problem altogether. So you may be able to stake your tokens, but in return, you also get a derivative, which you can use to do DeFi activity, which allows the chain to stay secure, 70% of tokens to be staked, but also give you, quite a number of tokens to play around with, even though your atoms are locked in staking.
So just to clarify, are we talking about the second token, like, which will represent like essentially almost like a future contract for the Atom that is staked?
Right.
So you introduced an interesting topic. There was another question on my list. So, I've heard you saying before that it will be like potential, like that's actually potential launch of the two tokens. One is going to be like almost like a gas token, and another is going to be the staking token, right? So is this the system we're talking about now, or?
No, that's in fact a different system.
Okay.
So the Atom token's primary purpose, right, is to provide security for the hub, is to enable secure usage of all these services that I mentioned before, the DEX, the chain name service. In fact, there will be a pegging system on the hub which will allow you to bring, Bitcoin and Ethereum and ERC tokens and secure them onto the hub to allow you to send through IBC to the multitude of other chains that exist. That's the primary purpose of the Atom, right? But for someone who holds the Atom, it feels very boring. You can't do anything with it. You can see that you get a very small amount of staking rewards with every single block, but aside from that, you're not able to use this valuable token in any of these cool projects that are popping up. So that's where staking derivatives comes in, and it's meant to give you this liquidity to start participating in DeFi while securing the chain. The topic that you raised, right, having a gas token and a fee token. So where the Atom fits in there is, yes, it's the fee token. Wait, was that what you said? Gas and fee?
Yeah, so no, the staking token, the way I understood it, like, you're talking about the separately two token model, right? When there is like a separate token for like, for the fees, right? And separate token for just that is staked, so it's called. So basically at some point you will have to introduce like, additional tokens. So what I'm trying to understand here is when in the timeline it will happen and what's going to be the purpose. And when you're introducing the derivatives, like, how will it work? And I mean, you mentioned that it might require another token as well. So just not to confuse those two tokens.
Yeah, so staking derivatives and a separate staking and fee token are two separate ideas.
Yeah.
In fact, the idea of having two native tokens on the hub is still something that we need to work out in the Cosmos ecosystem. What is clear, though, is with the adoption of IBC, there are going to be hundreds and thousands of tokens on the hub already. So we may see a future where one of these tokens that was actually created on a separate chain becomes the fee token on the hub. And we might not have to create another one ourselves at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's really exciting watching the participants who use the SDK and figuring out what they're building. I think I mentioned before, right? Binance Chain was one of the very biggest projects that are using the Cosmos SDK. They are rather centralized compared to the hub. But beyond the hub and Binance Chain, there are projects that you may have heard of like Terra and Kava and Band Protocol. OK Chain, in fact, as well, is also, OK Exchange built OK Chain, which is also built on Cosmos SDK. There are a bunch of other protocols and also centralized exchanges that are all adopting IBC because they were built on the SDK. And to see some of this activity pass through the hub is something that we're all incredibly excited about.
Got it. So okay, so we'll talk about derivatives probably later. Just to understand, because I think it will take time for you guys to build a derivative market. Because even in Ethereum, if you compare the Ethereum derivative markets to, I know that they're launching in a few days, on CMA, the additional derivatives, and it's still tiny compared to Bitcoin, right? And any other new incumbents that are trying to launch derivative markets, later, it's going to take time. It's like the volumes are going to be probably minute, and that will take time. But I think the idea is for any top 10 protocol, the idea is there, and it makes sense because that will help to drive attention from other investors. And as you mentioned, make them use Atom in multiple ways. So it will be interesting to understand better. Obviously, matter how will it practically work. So, but I'm sure we can get it in a separate conversation because it's in 1 hour we'll not be able to cover everything. Now, do you have any timelines when do the derivative markets will be launched?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're working on a timeline among our development teams today. So you did mention earlier, Tendermint was the team that created Tendermint Core, that created the Cosmos SDK, that ran the fundraiser. But today, core development is split among actually 7 different teams in our ecosystem. So, with this level of decentralization, it can take some time to come up with actually deadlines. But at a high level, right, the features that are coming next after IBC, like I said, is a chain name service, is the DEX. And then beyond that, Ethereum and ERC20 pegging or wrapping is coming onto the Cosmos Hub. And then staking derivatives is probably something that's later down the line. One topic as well that we didn't cover is shared security, right? I think shared security is very key to projects like Polkadot and Avalanche. How they operate is that they are building this incredible network of interconnected chains that are all secured by one token each, right? It's AVAX in Avalanche and it's DOT for Polkadot. They're very bullish about supporting this angle. But of course, the downside to that is that you will always have to buy their token and you will always need to pay it out for this security. Whether it's block by block or yearly, we expect that some of the more popular protocols that do emerge on Polkadot and Avalanche may end up moving away from them in the long run, just because the upsides of having your own sovereign chain is better than paying a large portion of your token or fees back to Avalanche or Polkadot holders. The Avalanche and Polkadot model is like a mall, right? So you have lots and lots of outlets available, and they all cost quite a lot of money to rent. But you gain access to this large community of users and perhaps like lots of amenities, amazing lighting and cleaning, etc. In the Cosmos model, it's more of an open field. You need to provide your own security. You might have to bring your own electricity and your own plumbing, but we don't charge you anything, right? And by not charging people anything, it's what has encouraged the creation of these hundreds of different projects that use the SDK. We think that this is the correct model for a sustainable ecosystem, sustainable multi-chain ecosystem. And it's the same model as the web today, right? So when you build a new website, clearly you need to host it yourself. But aside from that, you don't have to pay anyone for this website, right? Like comparing the web to the iOS App Store or the Google Play Store, where you have to fork up 30% of all your income to Google or Apple. The open web is still an incredible world where people can do absolutely anything, and you don't need to pay anyone taxes for being on the web. So this is the exact same model we're going with Cosmos, right? Like all of these cool features that we're introducing to the hub, they're all optional. You can always create your chain with the SDK and never connect to the hub, never use the DEX. You don't even have to use a chain name service, right? I guess the comparison to Web 2.0 is you don't even have to buy a domain name, right? All you need is your IP address. You send people that, and that's good enough. But clearly, if you do want to participate and you do want to be a part of something bigger in Cosmos, right? You probably want to connect to the hub. You may want to send your tokens there, allow people to start trading for it. And this is the model that we see for the hub and the Atom.
Got it. So I think that's an interesting comparison you provided there. Like, for example, let's talk about like some practical use case. Like somebody who's already have a project in Polkadot or Ava Labs, Avalanche. So and they want to use the hub, right? They want to actually participate. So what will be their steps to actually start this process?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, with Avalanche, I don't think there's any team actually working on IBC and Avalanche. I think it's probably a team that we need to start approaching to get them to support it. But in Polkadot, right, they're actually working on a module. There's a team, a validator team called Chorus One that the Interchain Foundation has funded to start looking into supporting IBC with Substrate, which is Polkadot's framework for building blockchains. So when IBC is supported with Substrate, all developers would need to send tokens to the hub is they would need to purchase like a very small amount of atoms, just to pay for the transaction fee, essentially, right? I think one atom would be enough, right? Which is $9. And at that point, they're able to send their DOT tokens or whatever token they created, or their AMA tokens over to the hub.
Got it. So that will be true for any foundation that will be interested to work with you. You will need to basically still build a bridge to create those interoperability, so that will actually work, so because right now it's only in the beginning, right? And the path is you need to help two protocols to talk to each other. If I were to simplify the explanation, because right now it's not that easy. That's still in the building process, right?
Yeah, that's in the building process. Of course, if you want to, start building your own blockchain today, I think we highly recommend the Cosmos SDK. It's entirely free to get into. We've been spending quite a lot of time over the past year or so making that process as fluid as possible. Like I mentioned, you don't even have to be a developer to start building your own chain. There's a couple of CLI commands you can run and have your very own token launched. Of course, you definitely want some validators, right, to make it a mainnet, a real chain. But we think that the barrier to entry is just about as low as possible in Cosmos that we can make it. And with other models of cross-chain interoperable blockchains like Polkadot and Avalanche, it's not going to be as cheap. It's not ever going to be as cheap as this.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, right, if you build on a platform where you have to pay taxes, right, there is always a chance you'll get kicked out, right? it's happening to applications on the App Store and Google Play today, right? If they kick out your app, you're losing your audience almost entirely. But if you build a web app instead, right, it's much harder to ban. So that's the Cosmos model.
Let me ask you, what should happen in the ecosystem of Cosmos so that they would actually like ban some project? What needs to happen?
To ban a project in Cosmos.
Well, let's say, imagine there is like, imagine somebody, because it's open source, somebody creates a project that will, I don't want to predict it, but let's say they will not have the best intentions for the community. Let's put it this way. So there is a voting process that, people have to actually somehow limit their presence on the network. So you can talk a little bit about it, like, how do you even provide this security and sanity of your mission and also of your goal, so that only because there's a certain risk there, that people of different sort will use your platform.
Our philosophy is the same as the internet's, right? If you want to build anything you want, you can, and it's allowed by Cosmos, right? Whether if it's allowed in your legal jurisdiction, right? That's for the country that you live in to be policing, and not up to us.
Got it. So you there's no restrictions on your side. There is no mechanism of banning you from the platform, as we know, like a lot of social media do right now. So that's completely decentralized.
The core concept of Cosmos is sovereignty, right?
Yeah.
That means if you launch your own blockchain, there's absolutely no way for anyone to take it down unless they actually cut the wires to your server. That's, I think, the model that encourages the most amount of innovation and allows for the most amount of freedom when building something new.
No, that is exciting. I think the fact that you try to still go this open source route, I think that's very, very forward thinking, because not a lot of people who can appreciate it right now, but I think in 10 years, from now, that'll be the only model that will exist. Similar to maybe, I don't know what example would go, so like Sun Systems, who were trying to also create like a paid version of open source solutions. And they had a lot of connection, they had a lot of power and impact, but or some other projects that that try to control the internet, but they all failed eventually. The freedom and the power of sovereignty, as you mentioned, and I think it will win, and it will create a completely new world where the protocols talk to each other. The fees are getting lower. The people are having all the voting rights and all the opportunities to build whatever they want. And the community actually manages the sanity of the entire ecosystem, right? So before we wrap up, I just want to ask you more of a personal questions. I know you being I would say a designer, and I would say in some sort of architect in what you're doing, right? I'm just curious, how do you perceive the space, and what's the future of the space, and what is the meaning of this, behind this, all those great ideas and initiatives for you?
Yeah, so I think this space is incredibly exciting to work in. There's so much, greenfield areas that have not had any development yet. With my designer background, the user experience for crypto and for DeFi in particular is just so arcane, it's so complicated, and it really assumes you have a vocabulary of terms, in your head already, right? There's no way people are, able to be guided into this right now. And I think a lot of work needs to be done on that front, to reduce the barrier to entry, to, open up the gateway to mainstream usage of these applications. There are exchanges, right, tackling this and doing a decent job of it, like Coinbase and Binance. But the big problem with these companies is that they still custody your tokens, right? You don't actually own your tokens. Your tokens are just a number on their ledger, because how they operate is that only a small number of tokens actually available in their hot wallet, and most of your tokens are stored away in a safe somewhere. Mm-hmm. So very similar to banks, if there's a run on Coinbase, then you're not going to be able to get your tokens until they take more tokens out and put it into the hot wallet. But of course, self-custody of tokens is also, potentially very dangerous, right? If you're any sort of public figure and you own a lot of tokens, then and you hold them yourself, right? Then that makes you like a target. So there is definitely some middle ground to be made here between what the usability and security provided by centralized exchanges versus you holding everything yourself. And so finding this middle ground, finding the right trade-offs, and getting as many people as possible holding tokens themselves while also keeping it in a secure way is something that I care a lot about.
Got it. And what's the purpose of life to you? Like, besides the crypto, besides the ideas of decentralization and the sovereignty, and I'm just curious, what is your personal motto?
Yeah, my personal motto is to learn more, explore more, learn as much as I can, and to stay curious.
That's good. That's a concise one, and I guess serves you well so far. And any books that you would recommend for people to read to understand better, what we were talking about today, or just generally something that is inspired, and change your perspective on the space or in general in life?
Yeah, so I think that books are probably too slow moving to stay on top of this space. And it's unfortunate because, books have a very good tendency of making things easy to, understand, within just a few hundred pages. What I really recommend if you want to, participate in this space is you should be on Twitter. I spend a lot of time on Twitter every single day. You follow, some of the best crypto influencers and the best builders, right? And that's really the only way you can piece together what's happening. So
no Reddit, no Clubhouse, or just Twitter is the main scene, right?
Yeah, it's really changed for me. In the past, perhaps I read more books, I read more blog posts, but these days I read Twitter threads and a lot of Twitter threads. And beyond that, I read a lot of code. As a builder in the space, that's really the only way you're able to make heads or tails of what's happening. And I think that's really unfortunate. I think, getting our ecosystem and the community to a state where it's mature enough to be written about in a book and not have it be out of date within a year is something we're marching towards, but we're definitely not there yet.
Some of the influencers you would recommend that are, I would say, less known, the underdogs and that you are following every day?
I can provide you with a list after this. I can't come off of it on the top of my head.
Okay, perfect. That works, and then I'll post in the description list so that people will also follow what you follow. I think that's one of the most successful strategies. I do the same. If I actually find a person that I really admire their analysis of the crypto, and their unique perspectives, I also try to see who they follow, to understand the world in the same way that they do. And then this particular angle, I think it is very useful to use Twitter. I frankly speaking, I hated Twitter before, and I pushed myself to start using it, and now I'm kind of getting more addicted. I understand why it's a very concise format of understanding anything.
It really is.
And it requires you to think a lot before you try to put it into 140 characters, right?
Yeah, boiling it down, right, is really key.
And it's not easy. I actually admire people who are able to do this, especially the longer reads, when they do the sequence of 5 different messages and in very concise format explain the essence, So I think, in this way, it is truly unique, So I listen, Peng, I think, I would love to talk to you for hours and learn more about Cosmos, and I really appreciate your time, but I know we have only this first, I would say, stab into understanding the Cosmos ecosystem. I think we will stop right here. I personally wish you all the success, I'm sure in 2 weeks once you launch these new updates, first of all, it'll be a great inspiration for the entire community. And I think people who are not even using the Cosmos for now, that will also help them to understand the power of open source, solutions, and then DeFi as well. So thank you for what you guys are doing, and I sincerely appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Konstantin. The insightful questions you had were really helpful. I understand that I think Cosmos is still very difficult to understand, I think, for most people right now. And whenever I talk to even new hires, they have to go through like a pretty rough 2 to 3 month learning cycle where we offload as much content as we can off our minds into their minds. And it takes time to learn. And with a designer background, right, all I really like to do right now is simplify it as much as I can, explain the value proposition of both our software stack, of the Atom, and why people want to, and should participate. Yeah, I guess after this, I'm going to go right back to building, and I would love to show you guys, what's going to happen after the middle of this month.
So the last piece I want to leave the listeners, whoever is either is going to watch it on YouTube or listen on podcast. So where they can learn more, like if they want to get a deeper dive, like is this your YouTube channel, or you have a specialized, maybe some of the forums where you also discuss the nitty gritty of the Cosmos updates?
Yeah, so the best place to learn more is starting with our website. So it's cosmos.network. Mm-hmm. It's a very comprehensive overview of everything that we're offering. And we have some great updates coming in the works that will even better explain what Cosmos is coming soon. I would start there. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter. I'll also leave that in the description.
Perfect. Thank you so much, man. Like, I really appreciate it. And I hope we'll do it more.
Thank you, Konstantin. Looking forward to providing further updates on Cosmos.